Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Joby. I'm the Director of Music here at Trinity-St. Stevens. And on behalf of everyone who worked so hard at preparing this concert, I want to welcome you here and thank you for coming. This concert is being held in support of our local food bank. And this church's fund for community outreach. There are two social programs that we're supporting. And unfortunately, at this time of year, the demand is very high for the food bank. So we intentionally didn't have a ticket price in the hopes that you would be as generous as possible later on in the program when we take our offering. All the proceeds of this afternoon are going towards to support the food bank and our church's fund for community outreach. A rather important housekeeping item before we begin. Please take a moment and check to make sure that your cell phones are off and anything else that goes beep or ding or plays I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus. Make sure that those are turned off, please. This afternoon's concert is sort of like an interactive experience, and it has three components. It has our storyteller, it has the choir, and it has you. All are of equal importance to the success of this afternoon, and that means when you stand and sing the selected carols, they are all familiar, and we hope that you would stand and sing loud and sing proud and have a really good time. Finally, there might be moments in this afternoon's performance where you might feel the urge to applaud. And I'm going to ask you that you hold that applause until the very end so that we don't interrupt the flow of the story or the program. But after the final chord of O Come All Ye Faithful dies away, and if you feel like it, you can go crazy and applaud the choir. Thank you again for coming this afternoon. We'll begin in a few minutes.
seated. Years ago, and at Christmas, for stories happened years ago. Years ago in New Brunswick, far from where I now live, with snowbanks as high as the wires and paths meandering to and from so many places that children knew, with lights blinking out against the ice collected on both sides of the river and hanging from boughs throughout our great wood. At a time when church still had much to do with the affair called Christmas, and we wore a red surplice to Mass on Christmas Eve, and the choir sang Ave Maria. At a time when voices from our choir drifted unrepentantly out against the brilliant light of the moon, my brother and I, little as we were, had spent all Christmas Eve day outside with the whole world at our beck and call, because our mother told us to get out from under her feet and not to come back, at least until supper. So we went sliding on cardboard far away down the great bank of our great river, through downhill runs near burdock and tamarack, and under the red winter sun. At 4 o'clock, as the sun was reclining, we trekked back half-starving towards our home, And just as we got to the high bank beyond Leiden Lane, we saw a small, chubby black dog, wise to this world for about 2 months, with snow over its muzzle and back. Its eyes blinked as it tried to grab at the icicles on its eyelashes with a paw. Its tail stuck in the snowbank. It looked at us as if it were simply waiting there for us to come along and relieve it from its difficulty. Those were the days when the snow beckoned us as it swept over our faces and lay in folds against trees and houses and across wind-forlorn, forgotten fields. Most of the houses that blinked out in the distance are now gone, and all the fiery energy of those wonderful, joyous people has now been swept away and laid to rest. The dog stared at us, and we stared at it. "That's a dog," said my brother. "Oh?" I said. I always had to play the role of being less observant than my older brother. It is the way of the world, and I'm sure that though we're now old men, I still do it. So my brother said this: "Since we had no money for presents, since my mother was a widow of some sort, and since we were considered poor, or at least not as rich as some, he decreed that this dog, little as it was, would make a fine present, and we should mitigate its discomfort and take it home." His ecstatic joy at that prospect was what determined my approval. That and knowing that my disapproval wouldn't have mattered in the least. I also suspected that the dog had nothing to do with a present, except perhaps a present to and from himself. This was a trait of my older brother's, which was just fine by me, for I too would get to give it a pat now and again. "Who's it for?" I asked, feigning a kind of joyousness at present giving, sniffing and rubbing my nose and spitting. He picked it up and, without looking back at me, carried it in his jacket, one of its floppy ears hanging out, over the snowdrifts of long ago towards our house. So long ago that our house can no longer be found. A child might search for it forever and never once find the door. And the people inside who loved and cared for me are gone away. So that even if I wanted to search and make known to everyone who I was looking for, so few would remember their names. "Mom, of course," my brother said, trying to step into boot marks made by much bigger people and being swept over. I threw away my cardboard toboggan before the wind made it a kite and me a kite string. "Why, Mom?" I was yelling now because of the wind against my back. "Because she lost Lucky. We lost Lucky." Mom had little or nothing to do with Lucky. Lucky had unfortunately been hit by a pulp truck some few months back, and we had come home after school and believed in bad luck in the stiff, uncompromising autumn night. "What will we name this dog?" I asked. "That is, I wonder what Mom will want us to call it. I wonder what she'll insist we call it." "Lucky too," he said. "Lucky too?" He no longer answered. Mesmerized by his own great good fortune, at least for now, everything was non-negotiable. Even the point I made that this dog, in some fashion, just might, mind you, and in some very small way, belong to someone else. Finally, we stepped back onto solid ground, onto the street that ran below our house, slick with ice and battered by wind. Carrie and Kevin and Emerson and others were playing road hockey down at the far end. The night was graying and the street lights were coming on. And of course, and I say this without qualms, or at least not many, then and exactly then is where our troubles began. Except to say they might have begun when we saw Lucky 2 in the first place. "What do you have with the floppy ear?" 7-year-old Cindy Foley was staring at us, nose running, mitts heavy with snow, hat twisted sideways and curly hair under it, red ears, lips almost stuck together with barley toy. "What ear?" my brother said, tucking away the ear as fast as possible. But when he did, the nose poked out, and you could see the tail wagging under his jacket, as if his heart were thumping faster than humanly possible. He grabbed at the tail, and I stood in front of the nose. "Nothing?" I said. "Why do you ask?" She licked her barley toy and tried to sniff. "Looks like a dog or something." Lick. "Look like doesn't make," my brother said, short and to the point. Thump, thump went the tail. Lick. "Not a dog," I said. "Let me see then what you's hiding." "No." "Then you are hiding something." "Go away." "Mr. Carmichael is looking for a dog, so you stole it." "Didn't steal nothing." "And I'm going to tell." "Didn't steal nothing." "I'm going to tell." "What a way to talk at Christmas," I said. "It's not right for you to talk like this at Christmas, Cindy." I was being slightly self-righteous for my own benefit. "Yeah," my brother said, "what a way to talk at Christmas." "For at Christmas," I began, "Christmas is a time, why, it is a time—" "Shut up," my brother said. So I did. Cindy took another lick of her barley toy, and her eyes focused all her little wispy, determined energy upon us. She was silent for a moment, as if in her scrutiny of our lackluster faces, she was wondering what word to use. We waited for the word to come as another blast of wind hit my back. "Thieves," she said. I believe this is the moment when we decided we could not back out. Before, we might have been able to back out with some measure of composure, but now there was no way. We had to stand our ground, come what may. Thump, thump went the tail. "Puppy stealers?" "Are not," I said. "You know what this means?" "No," I said. "What does it all mean, Cindy Foley? You're so smart, you tell us." "Mr. Carmichael is the dog owner. You are the dog stealers." Pausing and licking. "So it means," she paused again and sniffed, and then, taking the time to circle the both of us in a kind of insinuating strut, a little shuffle to her feet as if dancing, as if she were suddenly in a top hat and cane. She pranced 2 feet forward, then backed up 1, did a small twirl, then pranced 2 feet forward again, as snow blew about her brown wool stockings so that they seemed to puff up every second step. "It means police." Both of us flinched slightly, a flinch of sudden awareness, a road to Damascus kind of flinch. She was right. Mr. Carmichael was endlessly getting the police. A broken streetlight, the police. Plow too close to his driveway, the police. Children crossing his lawn, the police. Potato bugs sneaking over from a neighbor's garden, the police. "Police don't scare us," my brother said. I didn't elaborate on or affirm that remark. The kids down the street who'd been playing road hockey started towards us, for it was now too dark to see, and my brother and I quickly turned and walked up the far lane as Cindy began running toward them, waving her arms and yelling, "Get the police! For God's sake, someone get the police!" "I'm never giving up this dog," my brother said, as we crossed the old wire fence into our backyard. "Finders keepers." "Losers weepers," I rejoined. "Be quiet." And we went down the back way, through the basement of our house, and then upstairs into our bedroom, where we put the prize on our bed. There it sat, staring at us with big eyes, wagging its short tail and peeing. Of course, as you will have guessed, it was my bed. For 10 minutes or so, we tried to decide what to do with it, such as the prize that once had is soon taxing. My brother's idea was that we camouflage it, give it a kind of anonymity among dogs and dog breeders everywhere. But we weren't exactly sure how to do this. Paint it another color? It was black. We could paint it white. Cut its hair closer to its body at the front and the back like a poodle? All these grand thoughts and no clear-cut answer. "I'm not giving it up," my brother said. Finally, I went downstairs and got it a slice of bologna. And I'm talking bologna, one of the slices that used to exist when people still had to exist upon it. My brother gave it to the dog and then said, "We got a problem." Lucky, too, was sitting with bologna sticking out on both sides of its face, staring at us a little expectantly, as if wondering what other delights we had in store for him. "Look," my brother said, and lifted the right ear. My good God, serial numbers. "Now that's a dog," I said for some reason. "Well, why are you so happy?" "I'm not at all. I'm upset, but you have to admit Lucky never had serial numbers." My brother looked at me, took a deep breath, and said, "Get the eraser." "What eraser?" "I don't know. There must be an eraser around the desk. Go look and see. And well, just get it." I actually did find an eraser and brought it over to him. He looked at the ear, looked at the eraser, took a look at Lucky too, who still had the bologna in his mouth. "You'll have to use the ink side," I said. "I know." So he couldn't do it. He bent over, took the ear in his hand, once, twice, thrice, and each time Lucky Two's happy-go-lucky face prevented him from erasing. "It'll be too hard on it," he said finally, throwing the eraser at the wall. And then he decided this: "We'll have to take it back." Back where? That was the problem. He wasn't sure. "After supper, we'll take it back to the snowbank. We'll put the same amount of snow on it and stick its tail back in the same place, and that's that." Practical, but drastic. So down the stairs we went to eat meat pie, and our Christmas tree lights were on. Our mother, talking on the phone, seemed upset, but she said nothing as we came to the table. She asked us if we liked the tree, and was it as good this year as last year, for our father had died last winter. So we told her it was a wonderful tree, the kind that gave you goosebumps and this and that, and not to worry, that Dad couldn't have done a better job, and he was watching her anyway from heaven, so how could she do it wrong? "Do you still miss Lucky?" she asked. "Not at all," my brother said, looking at me quickly and with some amount of consternation. "You don't?" "Nah, dog's a dog," my brother said. "Once you seen one dog, seen 'em all."
I sing carols so
It was dark, and the tree was lighted softly in the living room near the good door, for all houses here had a good door and an ordinary door. From beyond the huge living room window, from where we had witnessed so much of the good and bad about our street, came the first glow of police lights in our driveway. My brother and I had one of two options. We took the second and ran. We got to the bedroom before the knock. My brother turned, grabbed the dog and put it under his coat. Smart. And then he wore his. Down the stairs he ran, trying with me behind him to get to the old door where we could once again, and against all odds, escape into the snow. At the good door stood Constable Fisher and Mr. Carmichael with my mother. My brother tried to step around them, the tail of the dog hanging from my coat, but I stopped him up, sure that we would be caught. "We've been everywhere," Mr. Carmichael was saying, "and can't find it. Some children probably picked it up." "But we will," Mr. Fisher said. "I'm sorry," Mr. Carmichael said, and it seemed he was sorry, and Mr. Fisher too, and my mum, and they were all sorry until the dog stuck its head out from under my coat. Then they seemed sorry no longer. We seemed sorry. "Where did you get that?" I asked my brother, astonished. "I didn't get nothing," he said. "I found it under your coat." "You stole it," I said. Me? "My soul, it's the dog," Mr. Carmichael said. "Where in the world did you find it?" We said nothing. Mr. Fisher asked the same. Again, silence. The dog itself, however, was shaking with evident joy, joy all around. Christmas abound and trees lighted and the manger so quiet with cow. "I'm going to get ready for midnight mass," my brother said, though it was not yet 7 o'clock, and he handed the dog to me. For some reason, he yawned. "Here," he said, and looked up at Mr. Fisher. "I found it under his coat." I did not put my fingers on it. I backed away towards the tree, as if Christmas alone might protect me. And then this strange question from my mother, as she hugged me, which in itself was somewhat of a surprise. "We thought we'd lost it when it got out of the basement. How in the world did you know it was yours?" The dog had been bought for us. It had been Mr. Carmichael's idea and his gift. It had wandered away, and Mr. Carmichael and Mr. Fisher, to help our mother, had been looking all over the neighborhood for it since late that afternoon. They had come to Mum to deliver the bad news. Now I took the dog from my brother. "Lucky too," I said. My brother grabbed it back. "Lucky too," he rejoined. And the dog answered to its name for the next 15 years and was devoted only to our mother. Once again, thank you for attending our Stories and Songs Christmas concert. We'd like to show our appreciation by inviting you to join us for some cider immediately following the performance over across in Burgess Hall. Let us extend a show of gratitude to our church choir, the guest choristers, our director of music, Jeff Georgie, and the accompanist, Gibson McMillan. Thank you to Wanda, Bruce, Kathy, and Terry, who also helped behind the scenes to make this performance possible. Proceeds from our offering will be split equally between the Amherst Food Network and Trinity-St. Stephen's Benevolent Fund. The Amherst Food Network runs our local food bank in an effort to prevent anyone from going hungry in our community. And Trinity-St. Stephen's Benevolent Fund is an outreach ministry of our congregation that offers emergency financial assistance to help pay rent, heating oil, electricity, and other expenses for low-income individuals and families. Sadly, many adults and children in our community live in poverty, and your generous donations will help them to receive the resources they need to start the year 2020 with a little less fear and worry. Let us pray. Loving God, we dedicate our gifts to the alleviation of hunger and hardship for our neighbors. Our gifts may seem small among the many needs, but we ask that each gift, no matter the size, be a symbol of love and hope in our world. Amen. Please remain seated as we sing together and the offering is taken. In that region, there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. Then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign for you. You will find a child wrapped in bands of cloth and lying in a manger."